last 3 million years. This comes from the IPCC's latest report that was released in August, on August 9th. And 3 million years ago, the Earth was a very different place. And it was 2 to 3 degrees warmer. The sea levels were higher. And we are basically taking Earth back into that phase. We are well on our way to do that. Temperature records keep getting break every year. Not only regional temperatures, but global temperatures. 2020 was the warmest year ever recorded, jointly with 2016. And every in the past century, the last decade was the warmest. So basically, the trend of heating is clear.
Akshit, you may need to speak a little closer to your mic. I think we are losing out on a couple of.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. No problem.
No, am I better now? Better audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So what is this heating basically doing to our atmosphere? Is that it is changing not only the atmosphere but our oceans, our ecosystems, and all of these places. There are 9 climate tipping points that have been defined by scientists, and these 9 climate tipping points are very close to their thresholds right now. And if we keep on warming our atmosphere, these climate tipping points are going to go off, and then the damage to the ecosystems will become irreversible. Some of these ecosystems are already there, and damage is already irreversible, and IPCC's report says it without any doubt. So what does warming do other than the heating? There's also the impact on extreme weather. Extreme weather may include cyclones on the east and west coast of India. It may include flash floods, landslides that we have seen recently. It may include heat waves and cold waves that happen very frequently right now. And heat waves and cold waves, and also heavy snowfall, which may cause avalanches. So now we'll get into the Northeast, what we did and what we found. Basically, what we did was we first analyzed all the research that is available online and in reports. And there is not a lot. We really had to dig up a lot of research here and there from everywhere, and it was very difficult to do. Then, after we did our research, we found places which we could visit and where we could showcase the changing climate, where the adversity is high. So that it might become a point from where people can take those case studies and take it forward. Even research organizations can do that. So what we found was temperatures are already rising in the Northeast. The trend is very clear. This is clear both from the research that we found and also from the anecdotal experiences of the people on the ground, the farmers, everybody. In fact, I recently found out that October 2021 was one of the warmest Octobers for the region, and a lot of Itanagar recorded a temperature of 37.8 degrees Celsius on October 16th, which is unlikely for October because the winter should have already started setting in. Another major change, a major thing about climate in the Northeast is the rainfall. It is one of the rainiest places on the planet, especially Meghalaya, where Cherrapunji and Mawsynram are the rainiest places in the world. And these places are also witnessing drying in the recent years, in the recent decades. So when we analyzed data, we went through rainfall records of more than 100 years. I think the longest rainfall record we analyzed was of about 135 years. And other 100-year records also we analyzed. Then we went through IMD's 30-year monsoon rainfall records, which was also showing that there is a decreasing rainfall trend in the Northeast. So all these records were showing the same thing. And then we decided that we have to go there and see for ourselves what is actually happening. And in fact, the probability of drought occurrence in the Northeast has also increased. Between 2000 and 2014, there was 54% possibility of drought in the Northeast. This, interestingly, this was higher than the possibility of drought occurrence in drought-prone regions like Marathwada in Maharashtra, which is of very great concern. So what is the general trend in Northeast is that there are extended periods of dryness. I think the past few years it has been, especially in Manipur, Tripura, the Nagaland, all these places have seen extreme drought. There's not been a lot of rainfall. But when the rainfall does happen, it happens in quick bursts. A lot of rainfall comes in, the floods happen, and then it dries up again. And then there's an extended dry period. So this flood and drought cycle is what is symptomatic of a changing climate, and it was clearly visible when we spoke to the people there. So extremely heavy rainfall caused flash floods, landslides, which have been happening all over the country, especially in the northeast. Another thing is that the region, especially the Brahmaputra Basin, the Assam's Brahmaputra Basin, the people are actually very used to the floods. They have been seeing floods for centuries and they've settled there in spite of those floods. But they understand the floods. They had adapted to it. But now, because the flooding patterns themselves are changing, they have become so unpredictable that when we spoke to even older people, 70, 80 years old, they are not able to predict floods anymore. It's very difficult for them to keep track of when the flooding will happen, and when it will go away, and how to plan for their agriculture and livelihoods and various things. There were a lot of short-term impacts like flash floods, landslides, soil erosion, biodiversity impacts on biodiversity, but there were also a lot of long-term impacts of floods that we found. Once we get into case studies, I'll get into that in detail. And some of the places have also started witnessing, some of the places that had not witnessed floods before have started witnessing floods now. So this is the map we created. As you can see, the states, almost all the states show a decreasing trend of rainfall during the monsoons. This is the 30-year rainfall analysis that we did. The data comes from the Indian Meteorological Department. And we were able to see the trends of increasing rainfall in some districts, decreasing rainfall in some districts. Some of the trends were significant. Once you read through the map, I think you'll be able to understand where the trends are significant, where the trends are not significant. But overall, if you look at the map, you'll see that the entire region is drying up because there's a lot more decreasing trend than increasing trend of rainfall. So also the local trends, as you can see in the map, the local trends are varied. And this is also because of the change in topography of the places. There are a lot of microclimates in the region, and that is why the local rainfall trends are very significant. For example, in Assam, in the districts that are north of the Brahmaputra, you can see that there are a lot of gray districts there, which are basically increasing trend of rainfall. And because the trend of rainfall is increasing in these places, the probability of floods in the downstream areas of these from these places increases significantly because these places are being fed by rivers coming in from the Arunachal, from Arunachal Pradesh, which are fast-flowing rivers. The topography is such that the rivers basically have a steep gradient to cover from when they come from Arunachal to Assam. That increases the flow of the rivers, the volume of silt and everything that they're carrying, and that also increases the probability of floods. Another important aspect of water, especially in the Northeast, is the springs, the mountain springs. And almost everywhere we went, and we visited 3 states, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and Nagaland. Almost everywhere we went, the mountain springs had been drying up. They had been drying up for maybe different reasons. I think a lot of research needs to be done. We were not capable of that kind of research, but we got a fair idea of why this is happening. One aspect is climate change, obviously, but there are also the other aspect is the human interventions that are happening, the construction activity that is being done, especially in highly biodiverse areas like Arunachal Pradesh, which is highly forested as well, and in Nagaland. Because of these human interventions, dams, roads being constructed, and other activities, tourism activities being taken up, these are basically exacerbating the impacts of climate change that the region is already witnessing. And most of the mountain springs have dried up, and mountain spring that has basically is a major cause of concern for water availability in the region. The another big impact that we have seen is the changes in biodiversity. A lot of places recorded changes in biodiversity, massive changes in biodiversity. Species that were regularly seen in these areas are not seen anymore. Species that were never around in those areas are now visible. So all of these changes and climate indicators, there are a lot of species basically which indicate what weather it is, if it is rainy or if it is winter. Uh, some species flower during spring, some species flower during early winter. And all these plants are now showing changes due to the climate. One very surprising thing that we found in Upper Siang, mango has started growing, which is a tropical crop of the plains. They had planted mangoes before, but they had never flowered or fruited. But for the past 4 or 5 years, they have started seeing that that mango has started growing in Upper Siang, which is an extremely cold area where mangoes are not common. This has caused a major impact on livelihoods all across the region because the springs are drying up. Agriculture has gotten affected. Not only agriculture, other kinds of livelihoods like cattle raiding, fishing, and all of these things have horticulture has gotten affected. Changes in so most of these states are rice producing states, and they produce diverse kinds of rice varieties. But both the diversity of the rice varieties has also come down, and the timing when the rice used to be grown has also changed. And the varieties that used to be grown during perhaps summer or winter or rainy season, that has also significantly changed. That is what we have found out. One also crucial aspect for livelihoods is the coming in of pests and insects. Most of these states, most of the villages that we visited are basically mostly organic agriculture, where a lot of pesticides and insecticides are not used. Not even chemical fertilizers are used. But now they are forced to use them because of the coming in of a lot of pests and insects, which have started destroying the crops, especially rice crops and vegetable crops. So the farmers are not able to understand what these insects are, where have they come from. Most of them might be migrating from tropical regions, but a detailed research needs to be done on these aspects to be able to understand what exactly is happening. Unpredictable flooding has also caused has also is not allowing people to do long-term planning. This was always the case, but now because the unpredictability of the floods is increasing, people have become averse to it, and this has started inducing migration uh, from the villages, especially in Assam. We witnessed a lot of villages, we went to a lot of villages in Assam, from where a lot of people have started migrating to the southern states, to Karnataka, to Tamil Nadu, Kerala, because of the kind of floods and dry seasons that they're witnessing. They are not able to practice agriculture anymore, and there's no other way out for them than to go migrate elsewhere to find work. So I'll now come into some of the case studies of the places that we visited. The first case study is from Dhemaji, Assam. On your left of screen, you can see this is Masdhiri village in Dhemaji district, basically on the banks of the Kumutia River. Jiadal Kumutia is a river system in Assam, which it gets flooded very frequently, and it also keeps changing its course. And but what we found was that the course changing itself, which is natural for the river, it's a natural process for the river, but the number of times, the frequency of the course changing has also changed. Now the course of the river changes much more frequently than before, and this has led people. This village, Masdhiri village, is a good example of how to adapt to climate because of the changing climate, because they have been moving far from the river stream because of the floods for a very long period now. And they started moving around 2007 when a major flooding event happened, and they've already moved 3 kilometers far from the stream, and now they are concerned because the flooding is more unpredictable, and they think that now they have to move even more further away from. So this constant movement for an entire village, this is the first time that I had witnessed it, and the kind of concerns that they have for the future, especially with the flooding events becoming more frequent, is of great concern. So 2020 was especially bad for these villages. Kekuri village, 28 houses had gotten washed away. And regions of the uh, uh, large regions outside these villages, especially in Kapumpuli village, which is close to Masderi, large places of rice fields were covered with sand. So this is also something that has changed in the northeast. A lot of these rivers are bringing in more sand than silt. Earlier, the rivers used to bring in silt, which was alluvial silt, which was basically could be reworked, and rice could be grown and other crops could be grown in that silt. Because now there is mostly sand, most of those places look like a desert rather than fertile land. The second case study is from Pake Kesang in Arunachal Pradesh. Pake Kesang is very close to the Pake Tiger Reserve. The Pake River that you can see on the screen flows through the Tiger Reserve. And it is a perfect example of how global climate change or even regional climate change is affecting the microclimate of the region. The microclimate is being affected by other factors as well. There is a lot of illegal sand, boulder, and logging that is going on in the Pake river bed. In fact, it was going on while we were there as well. And this has basically increased the width of the Pake River and flooding events. There was a massive flooding event in 2004, after which basically the river course changed, the river stream widened, and the possibility of the river getting flooded again increased drastically. There are also a lot of biodiversity changes that have happened in Pakistan. It's a tiger reserve, so it's a biodiverse rich region. There are some species like the blight kingfisher, which are only found in that region. They are endemic to the region. And the numbers have drastically come down. The number of butterflies and other birds, hornbills, have also drastically come down. But there is no research being done on these aspects, and that is why we don't know exactly. I've spoken to a lot of researchers regarding this, but nobody has any idea about, there's no quantification of how much are we losing, and we are losing a lot. So that is what is exactly happening. The movement of elephants from through the tiger reserve has also changed, and the changing climate might have to do with that. The temperatures, local people told us, have increased drastically, especially during the summer, and even winter temperatures sometimes in late September, October, even in December, the temperatures were much higher than normal when we visited the West Cumbing and Arunachal Pradesh. This example is good for getting to know what is happening through mountain springs. We traveled from Bhalukpong on the Assam Arunachal border to Atinga town, and even we went to Singchung village, which is further up from there, from further north from there. And all through that, 10 major springs we saw have dried up. So a major reason could be the construction of the highway. The construction of the highway has basically closed down the sources of the springs, or somewhere in between something has happened and the springs have died down. But the climate of the springs, maybe the drying of the springs was happening much before the construction activity started, and then the construction activity basically dried them up completely. And the rejuvenation of these springs is a very extremely complicated process. And a lot of research needs to be done on how there is a lot of research being done on how these springs can be rejuvenated, but perhaps more plans need to be made on how this can be taken forward on the ground. Singchung village, we also saw again a lot of biodiversity changes. The local people there told us that there are a lot of plants that are basically climate indicators for them, which tell them which season is ongoing. And these plants have started flowering or growing in different times. Plants which used to grow at the end of the monsoon season have started growing later, because the monsoon season itself has extended. I think the past few years, the monsoon season has been extending all throughout the country, and that is being witnessed in Northeast India as well. Like especially in a place like Golaghat, where people used to witness around 3 waves of floods every year. now have started experiencing a fourth wave of floods. Last year, they experienced the fourth wave of floods, which is completely unpredictable. And a lot of agricultural loss happened because of that. Wokha in Nagaland was also peculiar because these people, the local people there, had in Lipi village, had not seen floods in a very long time. We spoke to an 80-year-old woman who told us that she had never seen floods in her lifetime. Floods, massive floods, not regular kind of flooding, like flash flooding, they had never seen. But in 2018, many of these villages got flooded, and these were flash floods, and they directly resulted from extreme rainfall events, which we had recorded here from Delhi. We had taken records from IMD Guwahati, and we could correlate that the heavy rainfall events were the cause of these floods. So floodwaters were even visible when we went there in December 2020. Another important aspect in Wokha was the coming in of the pests. Pests and insects, which you can see the farmer is showing us. I think it's a brinjal plant, and these he could not make sense of how these pests came up. I think he has been seeing them for the past 2-3 years, but last year, especially because the rainfall was very high, the pest destroyed almost all of his crops, vegetable crops, brinjal, carrots, tomatoes, and all of that, and even rice. Rice also got affected due to these pests. Butterflies also decreased. So biodiversity changes is an ongoing thing throughout the Northeast, an ongoing process throughout the Northeast. What needs to be done? Basically, I've been speaking already about it. That a lot more research needs to be done. A lot of journalism needs to be done in the Northeast on climate change. A lot of digging up of records needs to be done. Also, the climate change impacts have to be studied integrated along with other human interventions like dams and construction of highways and tourism and all of these aspects as well. Also, more meteorological stations in the hills, because if the data is not available, climate researchers can't, analyze the data and tell us if the climate is changing, how much the climate is changing, and all of that. So more meteorological stations are required in the hills. They are very throughout the Indian Himalayan region, the hilly region, the meteorological stations are quite sparse. But Northeast, especially, this is a major problem. In fact, in Pakistan, which I just showed you, the meteorological station got destroyed in 2004 during the floods, and it has still not been erected. So we don't have any data from Pakistan. If you want localized weather data from Pakistan, there's no way of getting it because there is no measurement happening. So adaptation strategies obviously will mean that the communities, the local people living there have to be taken into confidence, especially in Assam where the floods are recurrent and intense and happen very regularly. So the local communities have good knowledge about their own places, even places in Arunachal about the springs. Local people have a lot of knowledge of where the springs are originating, where they might have been stuck up, and the engineering part of from the government or NGOs or research organizations have to take into account this local knowledge to be able to build resilient communities. So springs in specific, there are ways of rejuvenating springs. We spoke to experts, Chandan Mohanta sir in IIT Guwahati, who's an expert on springs and geology and hydrology in general. And he told us there are ways of rejuvenating the springs. And maybe this has to be from the government or from NGOs or other research organizations. And also pests and insects. Pests and insects are a major problem for the people, for the farmers in the region. And these have to be looked into more carefully. Research should be done by the agricultural universities, and they have to try to find out what exactly is happening there. Organic agriculture, which is already there, should be promoted, and new and innovative livelihood options should also be provided for these people who want to move out of agriculture, because agriculture is not very profitable anymore. These are few links to the Northeast India climate change stories that we had done. this is most of the coverage. I think it covers all the reports that we had done from the Northeast. You can go through them, but the presentation will be available later. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshit. Thank you so much. Before I move on to our next speaker, let me, accord a very warm welcome to our guest of honor, Mr. James Sangma, who has joined us. Namaskar, Sangma Sahab, and Ms. Sunita Narayan, CSC Director General, who's also here with us. I would like to now ask Avantika Goswami, CSC Senior Researcher on Climate and Renewable Energy, to now take the forum. Avantika, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Suparno. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. So good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mr. Sangma and Sunita ji, and all of you. Thank you for joining this event. So I am going to zoom out from, in terms of offering a climate change perspective, I'm going to zoom out from where the coverage that Akshit provided, and I will give a brief overview of the upcoming UN climate change meeting, which is called COP26, or the 26th Conference of Parties meeting, as most of you here would be aware. So before we go into the details of this particular, the upcoming Conference of Parties meeting, this is an annual meeting that takes place every year, and the foundation of the discussions that occur at each of the COP meetings is an agreement known as the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement, as many of you would be aware, it's an international treaty. It was drafted with the intention to cut the levels of greenhouse gases that are currently emitted into the atmosphere, and thereby to limit global warming. So the goal agreed in the Paris Agreement was that global warming would be limited to well below 2 degrees Celsius, but preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as compared to pre-industrial levels, which is the temperatures that were the Earth's temperatures around the late 1800s. So how would countries do this? To do this, countries agreed to provide voluntary targets called nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. And these NDCs are essentially voluntary promises that countries make. For example, the US will say, I will cut my greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. So these are the various types of commitments that countries have made in their NDCs. And the design of the Paris Agreement was such that every 5 years, the NDCs would become more ambitious. So the targets would be made higher, and climate ambition would thereby be enhanced to, enhance effort put in by countries to cut their emissions. Within this, India also put forth an NDC back in 2015. Its NDC had 3 goals: to reduce the emissions intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. It also had a second goal to have 40% of installed capacity of electric power to be coming from non-fossil based energy sources by 2030. And its third goal was to enhance its forest and tree cover by 2030, so that the cumulative carbon sink is about 2.5 to 3 billion tons by 2030. So all of these countries who are party to the Paris Agreement are going to be meeting in Glasgow in the UK next month to discuss how to collaboratively tackle the climate crisis. But again, as many of you will be aware, these discussions are less a collaboration and more of a negotiation. There's always a tension between what the developed world is willing to do versus what the developing world rightly demands. Considering developed countries like India have a very low historical contribution to greenhouse gases that are currently in the atmosphere. So what are some of the major themes that will be discussed this year in Glasgow? So I'm going to just walk through them very briefly because next week on the 27th, CSE is hosting another media briefing that is focused solely on COP26, where we will go into detail into each of these themes. But to walk through them right now very quickly, the first and major goal at COP26 will be to talk about enhanced ambition, or how can countries increase the commitments that they have made to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And all of this is to be done in accordance with the goal set by the IPCC, which is the UN's climate science body. The IPCC has said to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, we must cut emissions by 45% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels. So that is going to be one of the major focus areas of COP26, to get countries to increase the efforts that they are currently putting into cutting emissions. So far, the NDCs that are in place are going to be leading to a temperature rise of 2.7 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which could have catastrophic consequences. Another topic that will be discussed is net zero emissions. So as has been going on for the past couple of years, there have been discussions around net zero targets that countries are setting. Net zero meaning countries are setting the goal of absorbing some of the CO2 emissions that they are emitting through various means, like planting more trees or by deploying more technologies, so that net their emissions are zero. Emissions emitted are balanced by emissions absorbed. So we will be critically evaluating this concept to see whether it will have a meaningful impact on climate change. Another topic that will be discussed is coal, which is a major contributor to global warming. There is currently a lot of pressure, particularly from countries in the global north, for developing countries to phase out coal. So countries like India and China are very heavily dependent on coal, but coal is currently fulfilling a lot of our development needs, particularly for India. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to phase out coal and switch over to sources of energy like natural gas or preferably renewable energy. So this is again a complicated debate. Next, another theme that will be discussed is, of course, this is not an official theme, but it's kind of the elephant in the room, the role of China. China is today, as of the past 3 decades or so, China is the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. And its emissions are growing because it continues to build more coal power plants. It doesn't have sufficient ambition in its NDCs to reduce its emissions anytime in the near future. So we need to keep our eyes on China's trajectory and make sure that it makes some meaningful commitments as well. The rules for carbon markets, that is the rule book or the set of guidelines that will guide the development of an international carbon market, are one of the other priorities of the upcoming COP26 meeting. Climate finance is a major priority, particularly for countries like India. Developed countries had made a commitment that they would transfer $100 billion per year starting from 2015 to help developing countries reduce their emissions and switch over to greener technologies. This goal has not been met, and the specifics of how developed countries will be held accountable for this finance will be discussed hopefully at COP26. Climate change adaptation, another huge area of priority for developing countries, particularly since we are extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Adaptation must be focused. Currently, most of the financing for climate activities goes towards climate change mitigation or emissions reduction, but adaptation requires a lot of funding, and there's currently a huge funding gap for this particular area. On a related note, loss and damage is another major theme that will be discussed. how will vulnerable countries who have had very little impact on historical emissions be compensated for the damage they are suffering today? So particularly coastal areas, island countries who are bearing the brunt of sea level rise, coral reef destruction, for emissions that they have not really emitted. So what kind of financing will be provided for this? That's another huge agenda point. And finally, nature-based solutions. There has been a growing set of voices that are now talking about using nature or forests, wetlands, and other natural ecosystems to help combat climate change. But this is, again, a complicated debate, and we'll be going into this in greater detail at our upcoming briefing. Finally, some of the legalities and nuances of the Paris Agreement itself, such as how will the Paris Agreement be implemented, how will the timeframes of the NDCs be aligned between different countries. These such nuances will also hopefully be hashed out at the upcoming COP26 meeting. So the urgency of COP26 cannot be emphasized enough. As my colleague Akshit mentioned, the IPCC's latest report, the AR6 report, issues a code red warning. It conclusively says that almost 100% of the global warming that we see today has been caused by human activities. And even slight increases in temperatures, such as every additional 0.5 degrees, will lead to even more extreme heat events, extreme rainfall, and drought conditions. The Indian monsoon rainfall is likely to increase by 5% for every 1 degree Celsius of global warming. And as a result, what we are seeing today in terms of flooding, heat waves, droughts could become the new normal for a country like India. India is extremely at risk from climate change impacts as well. And last year, while India was battling with COVID-19, alongside that, some of the most major climate disasters in the world. So two of them, the first being Cyclone Amphan and the second being countrywide flooding due to extreme rainfall, took place in India alongside COVID-19. So these disasters are likely to get compounded, and the impacts are likely to multiply if we don't rapidly take action both on the climate change mitigation as well as adaptation side. So this is just a very kind of lightning overview of what COP26 will have in store. And on Wednesday, we will be discussing these themes in greater detail. Sunita ji is going to be offering some of her valuable perspectives on this as well. So we hope you join that briefing. And yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Avantika. Thank you. Very, very nice. So as Avantika just pointed out, on the 27th, we are doing a pre-COP media briefing. It's an online briefing which will be addressed by CSE experts. And I do hope that all of you who are present here will also be with us on that day to get to the depths of this subject a little more. So with that, I would now, can I take 10 minutes with your permission, Mr. Sangma and Sunita ji, to open the floor for some questions if they have.
Absolutely, Shuparno. I think it's important. It's a media briefing, and so the more interaction we have, the better it is. Okay, precisely. So yes. Really would welcome that.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, whoever has anything to add, any suggestions, any comments, any questions, please raise your hand and or unmute yourselves, whatever is convenient. So Kanya, they can unmute themselves.
I will let them.
Yeah, so you'll let. So just kind of take a check on if there are anything that, otherwise we'll move on to Mr. Sangma. Yes, Chris Stephenson, Sukanya. Chris wants to ask a question. Can you unmute Chris, please?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Yes, I think that's a very wonderful presentation, even in terms of how detailed the Northeastern presentation was. One question which I have with respect to how media covers the overall environmental issues is the fact that a lot of environmental issues talks about the problems in general, but from the investor side of things, there's not still a lot of confidence which is building up. Of course, there's a lot of investments which people are now talking about. How do we see in terms of the financing of green technology in the near future? What are the available incentives, at least for, say, the upcoming entrepreneurs or green energy industrialists to be at least investing for making climate change a better scenario?
Should I take that, Shuparno?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, please.
So I think, Chris, it's a very important issue. And I think you'll have to look at it at two levels. One is, of course, at the national level. Now, as you can see at the national level, there's a lot of work being done. I mean, green hydrogen is being funded today. There is massive new investment coming up in solar, in wind, in ethanol, in a lot of new areas of work that is happening at the national level. And that obviously that investment is also going at different states. But I think, Chris, the most important thing for climate change now is to embed the plan for climate change, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation, into the state plans. Now, the state plans till now, there has been an effort to make state greenhouse gas or climate change plans, but there hasn't been clarity in terms of what is it that each state will need to do for improving its adaptation capacity. What do we mean by adaptation? At the end of the day, we also know that adaptation is about development. It is about doing good development and at scale. And states like the Northeast, the biggest, and I'm sure Mr. Sangma will talk about this, the biggest wealth that you have is your natural resources. Now, how do you sustainably manage your natural resources? How do you deepen the control of community ownership over the natural resources? How do you build resilience of communities? Where are Akshat has very clearly shown us what are the danger code red, as the UN Secretary General talks about for the planet. What we are explaining to you, the code red for the Northeast. Now, this means these issues have to get incorporated into the plan for the Northeast, and then the investment that the Northeast wants to attract, the different states of Northeast want to attract, must be based on these, on this understanding, both of what can be done for mitigation and what can be done for adaptation. And I'm sure we will discuss this in the next session as well. But for me, the biggest issue for the Northeast is really going to be Avantika talked about the nature-based solutions, big issue that is being discussed all over the world. How do you grow trees for carbon sequestration? Huge opportunity for the Northeast. You are the one state where everything, you throw anything and it just grows. I have seen in Meghalaya, I saw teak plantations growing like overnight. But clearly you don't want to turn all your forests into teak. So what is the best way? What is your way of being able to manage your forest? And how do you earn benefits from it? This is going to be one of the biggest opportunities for the Northeast. So I hope I've answered some of your questions, Chris.
Sure, that works. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunitaji. Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to? I had seen a raised hand. Now I don't see the gentleman. So,
Mr. Banerjee,
yes, yes.
Can I ask? Am I permitted to ask?
Amit
Bhalerao.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Sangma, just 1 minute. We'll just take some questions.
Oh,
and come back.
okay.
You will have the floor very soon.
I wanted to just ask a question, but it's okay. No issues.
No,
I'll wait my turn.
We are looking forward to coming, or next time coming to Meghalaya and doing this in Meghalaya. That would be the best thing possible.
Look forward to it. Please, please. Okay.
Amit?
Yeah. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Ma'am, I wanted to ask just about Uttarakhand, if we talk about it. The current infrastructure that is being built in Uttarakhand is because of the tourism. And I wanted to ask if it is the tourism affecting the climate change, the impact of climate change in Uttarakhand. Like they are destroying big mountains and making railways through mountains, and will it affect the climate change impact in Uttarakhand?
So, Amit, very good question. And I think this is a big issue for the Northeast. It's a big issue for the Himalayan range. I mean, the fact is, the Himalayan range is the youngest mountain range in the world. It is intrinsically the weakest. It is prone to soil erosion. And the kind of landslides that we are seeing today have always happened in Uttarakhand. So this is not per se new. What has got added to the Himalayan range has been two things. One has been the fact that we are doing increased development. Now, Amit, every state needs development. To argue that we should have no tourism, we should have no roads, is clearly unviable. I mean, people live there, people have aspirations, we need development. The question, Amit, becomes how do you do the development, keeping in mind the ecological sensitivity of the region? Now, I'll give you a clear reason. I'll give you a clear answer. I was a member of the B.K. Chaturvedi task force set up by the previous government to look at the hydel projects coming up in Uttarakhand. As you know, on the Ganga projects, there's been a lot of hue and cry. What should come up, not come up, let's close, let's not have any. What I basically said was, you are building those hydel projects on the Ganga in the Himalayas almost as you're doing a mall development in Greater Kailash in Delhi. The projects are coming back to back. You are just not factoring in the ecological sensitivity of the Himalayas. So hydel is important. Hydel is the biggest energy benefit that the Himalayas gives the state. It is also a clean source of energy. You're also doing run-of-the-river projects, which are better than reservoir-based projects. So all that is good. But should you be planning projects in this madness? I mean, the engineers over there are re-engineering the river. My argument was, why don't you re-engineer your dams to take into account the river? Plan for the flow of the river and then plan your projects. Now, this is the arrogance, and I'm sorry, I can see a lot of my colleagues are from the gender of male, but I would like to say, this is the arrogance of men. You know, the whole thing, arey nadi kya hai? What is the river? We can just re-engineer it and rework it. You know, it is under our control. I think that mindset, when I see what's happening in Uttarakhand, it is the revenge of nature. It is somehow nature is telling us, listen, you better remember that we are also powerful. And as far as tourism is concerned, Amit, again, tourism is critical. Tourism is one very important part of the local economy of the Himalayas. But how do you do tourism in a way that you can actually make sure that tourism has a small footprint? How do you do tourism in a way that tourism does not come and contaminate the land over there? I mean, there are some very interesting models. I have seen Sikkim's homestead model. I have seen Leh's homestead model. I have seen some very interesting policies in different Himalayan states on how to do development in a way that you can keep in mind the local ecology. So I think the bottom line, Amit, is that we must not be arrogant about that we can conquer nature, that the Himalayan states, and I think the Himalayan states, that's why for me, the Northeast is the most beautiful part to talk to, because I think you understand nature more than anyone else does. And I think you can build an economic future, which is going to be so different and be a lesson to everybody else. And I think that's where I hope you will not make the mistakes of the rest of India and do it differently. But it's possible. Shuparno, the minister, had a question.
Yes,
I think
yes.
definitely...
Mr. Sangma, please. Yes, and then we can get on to listen to him. Yes.
I don't want to eat into the time, Mr. Banerjee. Just a very quick, question, or I'd call it an observation. There was a speaker who spoke about adaptation. And I just wanted to sort of know, what Mrs. Sunita Narayan's views on this would be. That when we talk about adaptation vis-a-vis mitigation, doesn't adaptation sort of make us complacent, draw us into a certain comfort zone that we can adapt, as you spoke about male chauvinism? doesn't it sort of, go into that sphere where, I mean, climate change, whatever, is happening, we can probably just adapt to it?
Very good question, Mr. Sangma. Really, you've hit the nail on the head. But, at the end of the day today, I think we don't have a choice. Okay? 10 years ago, your language and my language would be identical, because I was also fighting the word adaptation. And I was saying, don't talk about adaptation because you will take away the focus from mitigation. Today, the water is over the bridge. There is no way we can't talk about adaptation. You're seeing it. I mean, look at the extreme rain in Darjeeling and North Bengal yesterday, day before. Look at what we've seen in Uttarakhand. I mean, those pictures of Uttarakhand are mind-numbing. The fury of nature, they're mind-numbing. So I think, Mr. Sangma, what we have to do is to make sure that our adaptation strategies can also work for mitigation. To me, the answer will lie in trying to merge adaptation with mitigation, which is really where we can work, which the rest of the world can't do, but we can do. We need to look at adaptation for the reason that we have no choice. But we have to ask the rich world to focus on mitigation. And I think that's the difference that I see. Shuparno, before we move to the next session, I have a very important question, which I think I was expecting. Yes. I was very much expecting the oil, palm oil question. The hottest debate that has been, that is there in the Northeast. So to me, see, I think the most important thing with palm oil is that it's another cash crop, okay? It's a forest cash crop. Now, where do you grow a forest cash crop, and how do you make sure that you do not destroy your virgin forests for a cash crop? It's a plantation crop. Now, in large parts of Kerala, you have other plantation. You grow coconut, you grow rubber, you grow coffee. I have not been to the Northeast in the last decade, but I remember when I came to the Northeast some years, almost now, I really need to come back. And when I had come, there was a very important debate happening in the Northeast that you have so much ability to grow bamboo, that for you, if you grow bamboo, you can actually become the bamboo capital of the world. Now, bamboo is something which is can be used for construction. It can be used for everything. And I mean, your ability to grow, as I said, when I went to Meghalaya and I saw the teak plantations, I mean, in 5 years, you had full grown teak standing there. I mean, your ability, you have the right weather, the right temperature, the right soils, everything. So to me, the palm oil debate is about a cash crop, but it has to, the biggest issue is you cannot destroy natural forests for palm oil. Now, this is where the Northeast is going to have to stand differently, because in the other parts of India, most of the forests are controlled by the Forest Department and come under the FC Act. The good thing in the Northeast is that a lot of the forests are under communities. Okay. Now, this does mean there's a challenge on the communities to make sure that they do not destroy their natural forests for palm oil. And that is going to be a big issue going forward, because if that is done, then you will make the Northeast even more vulnerable when it comes to climate change, because exactly as Akshit said, you will see more drying up. I mean, it's a cash crop. What does a cash crop do? It grows very fast. It's a monoculture. It gives you income, but it is far more, it takes a lot more resources from the land than a natural forest does. That's the simple difference. Okay. But I remember when I went to the Jantia Hills, you have the most beautiful pine forests over there. I remember the Khasi Hills were different. The Jantia Hills were different. So, and I remember coming to Arunachal, and I remember going to Nagaland to see the forests over there. So, you know, there's a complete difference in your forest ecosystems. And for you, I think for the Northeast, what I'm not hearing is, And that's for the people in the Northeast to start talking about much more clearly is, what do you see as your forest future, your natural resource future? What do you want done with your natural resources? So that then becomes part of the future discussion. Okay? So, Shuparno, I need to shut up now because we need to take the next discussion.
Yeah, so we can now request our guest of honor today, Mr. James Sangma, to take the stage. Mr. Sangma, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Banerjee. First of all, a very good afternoon to everyone present here for this program. And I would like to take this opportunity to really thank Ms. Sunita Narayan and the entire team at the Center for Science and Environment, Down to Earth, the School of Environmental Communications, I think, and the AAIETI for organizing this really well thought out and very crucial workshop. I also want to thank all the participants who have logged on. I was just told that there were about 60, the last count. But I think that it's great that we've all come together for this program to fathom a global catastrophe that's sprinting towards us at such a dizzying speed. And I think that, we are all here to discuss collective solutions to reverse climate change in terms of mitigation, in terms of adaptability, and, look at a silver lining whereby we can restore our planetary ecosystem. I would like to take the opportunity here to thank the media fraternity for constantly striving to uphold the fourth pillar of democracy, and for shouldering the responsibility to educate and inform society on matters and issues that affect all of us now more than ever. And collectively, given the threatening challenge that we are facing today in terms of climate change, I think we all have to rise to the occasion in order to reform and advocate for the dire need of changes if we have to prevent mankind from such a catastrophe. I think we need to create and populate the idea of a state which treats its environment as a priority and looks at its economy through the lens of nature. I think this is something that's been absent for a very, very long time. In fact, there have been many advocacies in the global media telling us how economic development should be the only aspiration of a developing state. But there's hardly anyone telling us at what cost must it come. So I think that more than ever, it has become much more important today that media, be it electronic, be it print, or which is the conscience keeper of our nation, they now start talking about saving the planet in a way as if it were their personal passion. Definitely, such kind of advocacy should not come at the expense of objective journalism. Let me be very clear about that. But because the media has the power to reach out to the masses and, that kind of power which filters down to the grassroots of society, such kind of advocacy becomes a responsibility. And today I'm also here, to tell all of you that I've come to terms with my own personal reckoning after I have seen how COVID has just simply, ravaged us, and we've watched the institutional collapse that this virus has caused in my state and also around the world. And I think that this has been one of the biggest challenges that humanity has ever faced. Northeast India, we've been all talking about it, and this is the theme for today. I think what Ms. Sunita Narayan was talking about, I agree with her that we are one of the most pristine and also at the same time very sensitive biodiversity hotspots in the country. We are a region that houses, I believe, a natural capital, and we recognize that. And I believe that this natural capital performs a very valuable ecosystem services for maintaining cyclical activities of the planet Earth. And therefore, it is, I think, of very fundamental importance to India and also to the rest of the world. Unfortunately, like many other nations around the world, we have subscribed to developmental doctrines that made us extract, made us exploit our natural resources. And this has been happening at such a devastating speed. And this has had a devastating consequences. Deforestation and fossil fuels have been mandates for our government for decades and decades. And we have used this to lift millions out of poverty, no doubt, and achieve growth. But with no industries, we were basically left with no choice. These were the only sources of livelihood for us. But now we suddenly find ourselves at this existential crossroad. George Werner, very famous climatologist, has said that this pandemic is nothing short of a climate change on warp speed. And for me, my own attempts at learning about the complex nature of climate change system in the last few months have really forced me to shift towards reimagining new forms of economic development models and social doctrine for our future. And I think it's time for us to accept that humanity's encounter with modernity is not serving us well. My state, Meghalaya, we are seeing how climate change has started to impact livelihoods of our people. And, we've seen also how, there's been a considerable change in the rainfall pattern in our state. And this has resulted in an acute water shortage due to the drying up of the natural water springs that have been a source of life for us. And this has affected every other water source in the region. And most of our villages are dependent on these streams and these springs. In fact, Meghalaya, 55.7% of villages draw their water from these kind of natural springs. Therefore, I think given our experiences, we feel responsible to lead this discourse into the Indian public consciousness, as we also, on our own, we prepare ourselves to set out on the warpath to counter this environmental Armageddon through, I would say, our quiet initiatives. In our state, we are also revisiting the foundational principles of our economies and our livelihoods, the kind of quality of life, agriculture, and also our habits. And I think for that, we've been sitting together. I have my team with me, and I've been discussing with them. And we are in the process of blueprinting the idea of an environmental state. What is an environmental state? The environment state is, I would call it an economic paradigm for nations to mainstream the environment and the people as the center of markets and development, rather than just going after the notion of GDP. And this is also in pursuit of a new lineage of conservation and climate action economy. And this is basically born out of this paradigm where we prototype livelihoods that are based on conservation, on sustainability, and of course, climate action. I think, but a lot of people, when I have discussed this this idea of an environment state. They've basically said, so great idea, but how do you want to do this? And we in Meghalaya, we've given it a lot of thought, and what we want to do is to incentivize green livelihoods and nature-based solutions which can house climate and sustainable development goals, sensitive business is to eventually make our state a Silicon Valley of green enterprises where we can build special economic zones for climate action. There are some ideas that we are incubating and we are putting into practice as I speak. And some of these are about, we have been thinking about deploying, we are deploying rather a unique artificial intelligence technology to create a spectacularly detailed biodiversity heat map. We are also employing regenerative agriculture and agroforestry models for various cutting-edge food value chains. Instead of using expensive technology, we are experimenting with algae to clean up some of our toxic rivers, which have been made toxic because of coal and limestone mining, through a process called phycoremediation, which all of you know it. And we see it as something that will harvest it, as the new staple for a bioeconomy. You may have also read in the media recently about our pineapples, which we are going to use for vegan leather. And this has really, really resonated very well with a lot of people about vegan leather from pineapples. We're also drawing up incentives to attract green enterprises to our state. And I sincerely believe that this is something, not just ideas, and this is not something idealistic, but this also is not without profitability. Climate investment opportunities, I think, are expected to total about $23 trillion in emerging markets like India by the year 2030. And to take full advantage of this opportunity, the state and big governments especially must create conditions, new markets and new value chains that enable finance to flow to the right projects. This must come about. On the livelihood side, we are also innovating on various ecotourism models to turn forest-dwelling communities into stakeholders of environment and forest protection. Mrs. Sunita Narayan spoke about how most of the forests in the Northeast are owned by communities, and that's very true of Meghalaya as well. Majority of our forests belong to the communities. It's only about 6% of our forests which we as a government we own. We also have this mandate of carbon farming, which we are also exploring. We are also trying to take cues from this lovely idea that's come from Japan about forest therapy, about forest bathing. And we want to lay the foundation of forest therapy societies in that line. On the legislation side, we are building political consensus to introduce climate change curriculum into our schools, because I think that, yes, the action is now in our present generation, but we must not forget that climate change is something that our children are going to be grappling with in the coming future. And that's why we want to introduce climate change curriculum into our schools. We're also drawing up a climate emergency framework and weaving the environment into the public consciousness by building India's first climate change museum. This is already in the pipeline, and we feel that such a climate change museum will have a very, very big impact. We are also going to be showing biopatents for our living root bridges, which is synonymous with Meghalaya today. You just talk of Meghalaya, it's not just Cherrapunji, the world, it's also our living roots bridges. And this is, as we all know, a very unique indigenous technology practiced by a tribe in Meghalaya that builds bridges and infrastructure out of living roots of a Ficus elastica tree. I mean, all these things I've said, no doubt this is a very, very tall order for all of us. And all of this requires a paradigm shift. I have one of my favorite authors, Naomi Klein, and she's got this book, it's, called On Fire. And she has a chapter in it where she, which is called When Science Says Political Revolution is Our Only Hope. In line with this, in the last 6 months, we have gathered experts and innovators now to draw up this blueprint and this vision and this road ahead that we want to pursue. But for these ideas to really see the light of day, I think what's most important is political will and social consciousness and consensus also. And to walk on this important path, we need the media fraternity to join us in this mission. And that's why I think this program that we're having is so important. Environment and green action is going to be the next political frontier for governments across the world. And I say this with a lot of conviction. I can say that governments like us, we have no option, to follow suit. We are facing the brunt of climate change. We are so aware of the fact that the rising sea levels one day is going to affect Bangladesh to our south. And when the sea levels rise, the kind of climate refugees that we will see from Bangladesh coming up, that's a scenario that's playing out in our minds, and that really scares us. I guess that governments like us, we have no option but to have this narrative now. A remarkable study revealed last year that as of October 7, 2020, there have been, I think, 16 climate disaster events in the US alone. And the kind of losses that they had to suffer exceeded a figure, of $1 billion. I think Sangeeta was mentioning, Avantika Goswami was mentioning about Cyclone Amphan in India, which alone triggered, I think, 5 million evacuations across Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, and Bhutan in May 2020, making it the largest disaster displacement event of the year globally. In India also, I think there were more than 2 million people that were displaced and had to be evacuated. We are seeing these kind of erratic and dramatic patterns of rain, hailstorms, droughts, and floods. And governments will have to alter their course, because it's now, for lack of a better word, a national security threat. And but I think what we also need is public opinion and consensus through reporting of solution-based journalism by the media. And concerns related to the environment will have to be given more weightage, will have to be given more coverage, and the alarm bells have to be rung. And rung repetitively, we have to keep ringing it. This will pressurize the, slow-moving governments and the kind of bureaucracy, red tapeism, and the mechanisms in place to move faster, I believe. It will also activate the citizenry and nudge the quiet set of innovators, academics, and public administrators to do more. having said that, I want to emphasize that governance is a very, very complex process. Governments often have to make the critical choice between the right and the wrong. And transitioning the systems based on old doctrines, they take time and patient maneuvering. Therefore, I think in my conclusion, I want to emphasize that the message of the critical environmental juncture that we are in right now, it has to come in collaboration with the media. And we have so many brothers and sisters from the regional media fraternities as well who are attending this program. And I think the power and the target they command is even more important. Often the narrative of climate change and concerns is associated with elitism, where only a select few talk and debate about it. But whether that is the case or not, it affects everyone at all the different levels and the different rungs of society. They need to know what is going wrong and how to change it. Thereby, to even take the message of the grave concerns that we are facing today, media is one of the most important vehicles. All people need to have a common understanding of the role played by human beings in reducing our environmental degradation, deterioration. And in that, while the government can, we can maybe consolidate political will, the media must also consolidate the people's will. Perhaps one such collective approach can be achieved through this. I'm an optimist, and I'd like to, I remember Michael Jackson's song and reference to pop culture, but on a lighter note, I'd like to quote what Michael Jackson said in one of his songs, that we can eventually heal the world and make it a better place. So that's what I really, really optimistically look forward to. And Sunita ji, thank you so much for having me here and for giving me this opportunity to express myself. And thank you everyone, Mr. Banerjee and all the participants here. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Mr. Sangma. That was brilliant. Thank you so much, for giving us this opportunity to listen to you. I would now request Sunita ji to, come forward and say a few words. We have about half an hour of the session left, and then we can take in a few questions, perhaps.
So what I would really like to do, Shuparno, is to get questions. Okay?
Right. Okay.
I'm available for people to fire and to get questions. And I think that would be a much better, because you've heard from Akshat. Akshat has given a very detailed, this is a detailed investigation down to earth has done, and we will keep coming back, and we hope that we will collaborate with all of you. We want to, as Akshat has said very correctly, that the Northeast, the most important thing for us would be to keep reporting and writing as events happen on the ground. And there is no better partnership that we could have than with all of you. And which is why this briefing workshop, and as I understand from Shuparno, this is the first that we are going to be doing. And we will continue this. He's even titled it. So it's called the Northeast Narratives, right? So this is not the end. This will be something that we will keep going. And I hope one briefing workshop, you can all come and spend time with us at the ATI. But I hope the next briefing workshop, we can come to the Northeast and spend some time with you. So we are looking forward to keeping this conversation going. And the idea of it today really was to, and as Mr. Sangma has so correctly said it as well, and I want to emphasize that. Mr. Sangma, I'm also a journalist. So when you speak, when you were talking about it, you're also talking to me. This is my community. I'm very much part of this. The biggest pleasure I get is when I write. When I see, when I write, when I understand, that's what makes me what I am today. And I see all of us, our role is really to tell the story as it happens, Because as we make the links between, and the reason why this conversation is particularly important is that climate change is not very easy to understand. Climate change is one of those subjects which requires us to join the dots, because you could very easily slip into a trap and say sab kuch climate change ke karan. Everything that happens is because of climate change. But that is not right as well, because climate change exacerbates the development crisis that we have on the ground. Climate change has ways in which it will, after all, somebody will come back to us and say, as journalists, they will say, hey, you're talking about climate change, but there's always been variable rainfall in the Northeast. There is always been landslides in the Northeast. So why should it be called climate change? What we have to say is that we are now seeing an intensification or an increased frequency of those weird weather events. We have got to get the data together to be able to argue, and rightly so, that what is happening that makes that change happen. And that is where to me, journalism is about two things today. And that's the biggest task you have. One is about local perception. Local perception counts, because local people are the biggest. They are at the forefront of the change. To me, when Akshat tells me that he met a woman in Nagaland and that she was 80 years old and she can't remember such a flood, I take that seriously, because she is in some senses she is the investigator of climate change. She is telling me that something different is happening in my world. When I hear about the fact that the mango is flowering in a different season, or in my garden, I can see things happening differently, I think these have to be the local narratives that we have to use to be able to understand the change that is happening. Because today, science is behind the change. Science is not ahead of the change. We are ahead of the change. As journalists, we are people who know the pulse of what's happening on the ground, and we should be able to talk about it. The second thing is that as environmental journalists, we know that environmental journalism requires us to tell it as it happens. And sometimes it is talking truth to power, and there are some very inconvenient truths. Now, that is also part of our work, and we have to do it. But as Mr. Sangma, I think in a very polite way also said, and we take that seriously, Mr. Sangma, what you're saying, because we know you're on the other side of the table and we're on this side of the table. But I think we're in this together to say, we know that there are uncomfortable and tough decisions that government has to take. And sometimes government, but you have to also understand from our point of view that if we don't call out those tough decisions, then government is also not made aware of them. And that is the partnership which has to be made out of, in a way, and sometimes it is tough. I mean, CSC is known for raising some very, very tough issues, and we have got, we have made friends, we have made enemies, but I can tell you that each one of the enemy that we have made has ultimately become a friend, because the person knows that we have not written with malice, we have not written with any sense of we are not in politics. We have written clearly just to point out that here is a problem, please take care of it. And yes, if you don't take care of it, sometimes we will be angry and say, why didn't you take care of it? It is a serious issue. But we also understand that there are differences and there will be different places from where we come. But the local environmental challenge is related to the fact that if we don't manage our environment, then climate change will exacerbate those impacts. I talked about Uttaranchal. Uttaranchal is about, Uttarakhand is about the fact that there is, and I use this word deliberately, and I'm using it with total responsibility, the madness of dam building in Uttarakhand. And it is madness. Making a dam after dam after dam, re-engineering the river, not thinking once about the fragility of the Himalayas. That is development where climate change impacts are getting exacerbated. Now, when the cloudbursts happen, you must have seen those pictures of Nainital. Okay, now for how long activists in Nainital have been warning the government about the madness of urbanization that is happening in Nainital without any master plan on how and where Nainital will develop. So these are all issues which now need greater urgency because climate change will exacerbate those impacts. And the third part of the story, which I really enjoyed what Mr. Sangma said, and I love it. And I think this is what is the third part, and which to me is the most exciting part. And it's often tough as journalists because for us, it's difficult for us to tell a good news story, but we are learning, Mr. Sangma, we are getting better at it. We are learning to do good news stories as well. But the fact is that the biggest opportunity is the reinvention. And I love the idea of an environment state. Mr. Sangma, please do it. We are behind you and we would love you to see how you will put that together. You know, and I will send it to you some years ago, almost 10 years, a decade or over ago, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India. He had asked me, I had gone to him and said, that Dr. Singh, it's important for Himalayan states to come together to have their own vision of growth. And I said that Himalayan states have a particular way that they must live and grow with nature. And he was excited about it. I'd given him a note. And because of it, there was the whole Himalayan mission was set up. And then, of course, there has been the Himalayan Council of Chief Ministers. But quite frankly, Mr. Sangma, it's not doing what I had intended. My intention was that the Himalayan states must come together to discuss how do they do development that it's environmentally sustainable. How do you do agriculture so that it is organic, high value? How do you build a nature-based economy? Some things that you talked about. How do you provide livelihoods to people? How do you provide employment to people? I mean, it is a very important part of the growth story of the Northeast. You need employment. You need livelihood security. But nature is your biggest asset. And this is why the idea of an environment state, and I hope you will succeed in it, is fascinating. And we need as journalists to understand these. How are they happening? What is happening? There's a lot of good work to use nature for environmental sustainability. I know that Avantika and I are working on a detailed paper looking at sinks. And some of the very interesting ideas are coming from the Northeast. And we will reconvene on that as well. But I think this is the three part of the story. One, to understand climate change as it is happening, see it from ground up, listen to the voices of people so that you can report it as it happens, understand the science, call out the lack of science. I mean, Akshit, I hope that we will write, and please send me a letter, we will write to IMD on this and raise the issue about the lack of forecasting stations, and particularly the one that you told me that you've written about, which is out of operation since 2004. That's unacceptable. In a age of climate change, every station has to be operational. So there is the first challenge. The second challenge is to tell the environmental story, however inconvenient it may be, to tell it as it is happening. And the third, of course, is to tell the opportunity of rebuilding. And to the opportunity of rebuilding so that it can actually be green. And, you know, there is this buzzword in the world right now, build back better, build back better, build back greener. I mean, Northeast is an example of how this can be done. And that's really where I see the three parts of our story. And we will keep our, as the Northeast narratives going with you on this. But I'm open to questions. I'm sure Mr. Sangma is as well. Shuparno, we still have 20 minutes and we can take questions from everyone.
Let me see. There's nothing currently on the chat, but...
Now I have Chris again. Chris,
so Chris again.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you're audible.
Yes. My question is to Mr. Anita as well. I think there's a development paradox in the Northeast when it comes to the discourse of climate change. I think Mr. Sangma was mentioning that the Northeast region has not industrialized like the other parts of the nation. So development is based on, say, fossil fuels that way. So in the coming days, because demand is likely to grow, how do we balance this paradox with the goals of tackling climate change that way?
I think, Daniel, very good question. I mean, this is the challenge across the world. I mean, why the Northeast? It's a challenge across the world. Okay. I mean, this is the core of the challenge. We have natural resources, and the Northeast particularly, you are based on your fossil fuel natural resources. And, Meghalaya has had a very checkered history with its coal issue. We know of other states as well. That's where the big challenge is. But we need now to be able to build back differently. Now, and employment is a big one. Now, what excites me is that Northeast is fundamentally different in one way. Your forests and your lands are under community control, which gives you huge ability to be able to use the communities for building back your natural resources. Now, this is slightly different from the rest of India, where forests largely are under the forest department. Now, so then it becomes much more difficult to say, how do you build resources on it? Because then the employment generation is really under the hands of the forest department. So there is an opportunity. I don't see it happening at scale. I don't see it happening at the level it can. But I see, Daniel, this is where the opportunity and the excitement that I have in the case of the Northeast is that you can do it differently. I see these opportunities lesser in other parts of India as I do in the Northeast. I mean, when I have traveled and I have seen, for instance, I mean, what are your natural resources? You have land, you have forests, you have agriculture, which is really cannot be used for anything but high value agriculture or subsistence agriculture. So subsistence agriculture is really your garden, your homestead farming that you do, which is so rich in the crops and the diversity. But then it is your high value agriculture. Now, if that high value agriculture can turn into organic agriculture, look at the opportunity you have there of creating high value production out of it, creating businesses out of it. We did an expose on honey this year, as you know, Daniel, when we looked at honey and the adulteration in honey. I mean, look at the incredible honey, the natural honey production that would come from the Northeast. I mean, citrus, you are the motherland of citrus. Citrus started in the Northeast. I mean, there are huge, I think, I get really excited when I think about these. And the main thing is, how do you process it? I mean, I just went to Ganganagar, very different from the Northeast, but I just went to Ganganagar. Ganganagar, for some of you may not know, is at the border of Pakistan and India. It's in Rajasthan, and in Punjab, there's a district called Abohar. I saw the most incredible citrus farming happening there. I mean, and I saw the value of that citrus farming because it uses less water than paddy. It's far more ecologically sensitive. But what I came back asking myself is, why is that citrus not turned into local businesses? Why is that citrus farming not led to massive numbers of small industries coming up so that you could actually use that citrus for every kind of product that you could make out of it? So I think today the biggest challenge is, and the biggest opportunity is, to use natural resources, the capital, natural capital for economic capital. And that's the value of the Northeast that needs to be optimized on. That's really the green future that we are talking about. Mr. Sangma, you want to add anything to this?
No, I think you've sort of like said it all, Sunita ji. I mean, I couldn't add anything more to that, really.
No, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think what you said has inspired me as well. So thank you.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Shuparna, we had one more
We
hand
have
up.
a few more questions which are coming up on chat. Jimmy Pamei, editor of Tamenglong Times, is saying that Manipur has different climatic conditions, but only one IMD station. So reporting on climate-related issues for journalists is a big challenge. From a hill town like Tamenglong, where recently the GI tag orange has been identified and grown. So is there? It's like a comment, but then do you have anything to say to it?
Akshat, you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, I think because of lack of time, there are a lot of states that we could visit. We wanted to visit actually all the 7 states because they're all very diverse, and the problems are there are a lot of problems, a lot of climate change related impacts. Manipur was one of the states that we wanted to visit because it's been going through an extended drought period. Even this monsoon, when other states have received decent rainfall, Manipur was extreme drought. I think it had more than 40% deficiency of rainfall. And the point is already there that IMD has very less stations all over the Northeast, especially in the hills. And most of Northeast is hills. So that is something that needs to be reported on, and that needs to be taken up with the IMD, that more meteorological stations have to be opened up, because without the data, the climate change researchers can't do anything else, and neither can the journalists. So
related to
local level data, Akshat. Yeah. I mean, what the point here is that Ukrul is different, and we need local level data. So I think, Akshat, at some point, if you can discuss this with Richard, I think a good story would be to look at the network of stations, and particularly look at the Northeast and look at what is possible. And today we also looked at some of the remote sensing possibilities for this. So maybe that could be something we could take up also with IMD and talk to them. And maybe you could have a conversation with IMD, Akshat, post this, and say that this conversation, what are they planning to do for the Northeast? Because we definitely need more stations.
Yeah.
Okay. Though I was also told, Akshat, that the station, that even in Uttaranchal, I was told, Uttarakhand, in spite of all that we have been writing, the Dopplers have not been set up yet. And I was told this latest cloudburst that happened, that one station is still out of order.
Yeah, so Mukteshwar, where a lot of the rainfall happened, where the cloudburst basically happened, had a Doppler radar, but that was it did not work. So there was no warning that was generated. And the other station that had to come up, there's 2 more stations that had to come up, and both those stations have not come up yet. And
I think last time we did a story on IMD and the fact that they're not getting their act together. And we need to raise that issue, and we need to raise it in the context of Northeast, but also other vulnerable areas of India. I was told Kerala had the same problem as well.
Yeah, Kerala also, I think one of the coastal Doppler radars was not working during these floods. So yeah, I think these instrumentation problems that the IMD is having is a major issue. I think it needs to be taken up, and I'll start.
I think, Shuparna, at some point we could do maybe a good media briefing on the whole issue of IMD and stations, and even call IMD. We know Ramesh, we know Mohapatra. We should call them and ask. I think it's a big issue for us to understand these issues. Right. So let's speak to Dr. Mohapatra on this.
So one of the earlier questions, Sunitaji, was related to authenticity of reports on Indian forest cover.
Yeah, very good.
I think you must have seen that.
Yeah.
So most of the questions that I'm seeing are related to operational difficulties that media people and journalists are facing in that region in terms of accessing credible information. So this is also something related to that. Asking whether there is an authentic report on India's forest cover which may be more accurate and useful for reporting.
So I mean, the forest cover data comes out of FSI. And I mean, my understanding is that The problem is really the ability, they do a combination of both satellite imagery and ground truthing. Now, satellite imagery in the Northeast has always been an issue because of the cloud cover issues. And there has been huge, I mean, the remote sensing people have become very smart in being able to identify natural forests from plantation forests. And that has been a good, that ability now exists in India. And I have no doubt that FSI and NRSA and does the Northeast, do the Northeast states have their own remote sensing agencies? Can somebody answer that? Akshay, do you know?
Yes, ma'am. They have the Northeast Space Application Center, which takes care of remote sensing in the region. And they do have good remote sensing capabilities, and they do bring out reports as well. But we'll have to see how good these reports are and like how much work has been done.
So, I mean, there's an overall problem of data, but I don't think you should call this a Northeast specific problem. This is a problem across. And, you know, as best as possible, forest reporting is done top down and bottom up. Now, bottom up means ground truthing. Ground truthing is often difficult. Forest department is much easier about the land that they own, that they possess. I mean, the good thing in the Northeast is, and I really think that's your wealth. So please don't want it to go back to forest department and the state. I think your biggest advantage is that the forests are in the hands of communities. And maybe they will make mistakes. And I remember my trip to Konoma village now many years ago, and there was this violent argument between the elders in the village and the young in the village, and I was sitting there and listening to this, where the elders were saying that we need the forests and we should not cut it down, and the young in the village were saying, you know, I mean, we need growth, we need development, cut down the forests. And but the fact is, community ownership in the Northeast is a very, very powerful thing. So I don't have much more to offer on the lack of data or the inaccuracy of data, but it's a work in progress, and we will keep pushing and keep asking, and you keep doing it as well, and we will keep working together on this.
Ma'am, just to add here, recently Down to Earth did a story, a very small web story. Kulaha had worked on it. He got data from satellite imagery from, I think, one of the US or European satellites, I think it was Copernicus or one of them. So he found that Northeast India had the largest decrease in forest cover. So if somebody wants that link, I think I can send it across, or I can put it.
Now, please do that, and then we should follow that up as well. Why, what?
The point here also is that, CSE and Down to Earth, I'm talking to all of you assembled here, my media friends. CSE and Down to Earth also is a reasonably sort of resourceful bank, which you can actually look forward to and rest upon, and try and get in touch with us whenever you are looking for information like this. So that's also there. We have about another 3-4 minutes, perhaps.
We have another 10 minutes, Shuparno.
So we can, we can.
Any other questions?
Any questions, suggestions that anybody might have?
Any more hands?
No, I can't see any hands.
May I ask something?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Can you just introduce yourself? I can't see.
Yeah, I am Nivedita Khandekar. I am now with.
Hi. Yes.
Right now, I am with IANS.
Okay.
But earlier, as an independent, I have been traveling to Arunachal and Assam and done a lot of reporting from there. My question is rather a comment and a suggestion I would want from you or anybody from the Northeast itself. When people like me go there for reporting, there's this dearth of, at the ground level, the district level officials, they're not as much informed as the state level officials would be. And for people like me, it's not always possible to, travel to 2 different places at one go. Not always. I mean, I have done it sometimes, but not always. So in such cases, what are the ways that the people, the reporters in the Northeast are doing to get information at the district level?
Nivedita, that's a challenge that everyone has. You are a reporter, I'm a reporter. My rule to all my reporters is be a dog with a bone. keep going out, keep asking, everywhere we get blocked for information. But if Akshit comes back saying he didn't get it, I said, did you confront them? Did you harass them? Did you bully the people? And of course, that we also know that information is difficult. People don't have, but people have ideas, people have perceptions, people have experience. And yes, we need to keep at it. I mean, to me, the richness of the media and all our work is that we have to stay at it, and we have to keep telling the story as it happens. And we have to do our best. And I'm sure, we will keep making a difference. I mean, today, climate change is such a big issue that in the Northeast is so vulnerable. We have to make sure that we can take that voice and bring it out.
Thank you.
So let me.
Shuparno, anyone else?
I'm just trying to see if there are. There is a hand by Mr. Nayak, C.K. Nayak.
Yes, Mr. Nayak, please go ahead.
I am C.K. Nayak.
Yes.
I am the correspondent of Shillong Times based in Delhi. I am with that Delhi for the last 25 years. I am also a fan of yours as far as the environment is concerned. So what I am suggesting, since COVID is ending and things are opening up, it will be better if Down to Earth with such a reputation can go to the Northeast and organize such workshops in those states on specific issues. Like Manipur is facing a drought situation while the rest of Northeast are facing flooded with more rains. So it should go to, your team should go to Imphal and have such workshops among the journalists. That will be helpful. Similarly, in Shillong, we have problems for environment in different regions. So you should also go to Shillong. Your team should also go to Shillong and have such workshops there itself. That will be much more helpful. And as a correspondent was Shillong based here, I regularly read your paper, and we'll be in touch with you whenever we need any information from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nayak. It's a very good suggestion. And I mean, obviously we can't, we're also a small organization, but we will keep doing our best. I mean, Northeast is an area where I think, Akshat, you have spent how many days now, and then we keep going back, and we will keep going back. And I think what will be nice, Shuparno, is as you have now decided to do this. I mean, this is not something Shuparno discussed with me. It's completely his idea.
Sorry to just interrupt.
Yes.
As we speak, there's this information that tomorrow there's going to be a discussion about weather and climate services advances in Northeast India. This is 11 o'clock tomorrow. If you don't mind, I can share the post here.
हाँ निवेदिता कर दी है, but ये तो ऐसी तो चीजें always होती हैं, so that's happening. But I think
you just discussed about the lack of equipment there. Maybe we can ask questions there directly.
No, please go ahead, and that will be good. And but I just to make the point, Shuparno, I think we should plan a workshop in the Northeast, and we will definitely do so soon enough. But I have another hand up, Shuparno.
Yes, Mr. Gotinian
Gangte.
Yes. Sukanya, can you unmute him, please?
Yeah, I think he should be able to unmute now.
Just unmute yourself.
Can you unmute yourself? Mr. Gante, can you hear us? You'll have to unmute yourself, Mr. Gante.
Akshat, this one that Nivedita spoke will be interesting for everyone. I think also for you.
Yes, ma'am, I'll attend.
Should definitely attend and ask. Thank you, Nivedita.
I think Mr. Gante, he's now managed.
Yes, please.
Yes. We can't hear you very clearly.
You can probably put it in the chat. We are not able to hear you.
In the meantime, let me answer Ranju's point from Itanagar. Ranju, unfortunately, we don't have those kind of resources, but we would love to raise some money. Maybe we will try. Maybe Shuparno, see if we can raise money for specific media reportage and grants in Northeast. So let's discuss it. Let's discuss it next month and see what we could do. But I think it's a very good idea. Yes. And let's see how we can start our fellowship program again.
Something in that vein, what we used to do sometimes.
Yeah. So we are now running short of time. So can we have Mr. Gante and Daniel quickly?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Mr. Gante.
Yes.
Gante?
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Gante, can you hear us?
Yeah, I want to ask one question.
There is a lot of noise at the background, Mr. Gante. Can you please ask them to?
But I need to know the weather. Hello?
Yes.
What are the factors of that effect of climate change in the Northeast India?
Sorry?
I will repeat it. What are the factors that affect the climate change of climate of the Northeast India?
I got the question, Shuparno. I can answer it. No problem. I've got the question. Let me get Daniel's question also in, and then I can answer both together.
Daniel, please go ahead. No, you're not very clearly audible, Daniel. You can put the mic up close. No.
Daniel, can you try without the headphones?
Without the headphones, yes.
Yeah. See, I'm Daniel from Imphal, and I was one of the participants of the AAD.
Yes, I remember.
2020.
Yes.
And I'm very much happy to be in touch with CSC since the AAD 2020. And actually, my question is like that. There is an ongoing project about the fencing, border fencing in Manipur with Myanmar. So, how much impact will it give to the environmental issues? Thank you.
So, Shuparno, let's take these as the two last ones. I'm going to ask Akshat to give a very quick answer to Mr. Gante. Akshat, what is it that makes Northeast most vulnerable to climate change?
There are a lot of factors. Obviously, the global climatic factors that are affecting climate everywhere. Those are the things that are affecting the Northeast as well. Northeast is a bit different, especially regarding its monsoon variability, because the monsoon in the rest of the country and in Northeast is in kind of a phase out. Basically, whenever it rains in the rest of the country, there's no rain in the Northeast. And when it starts raining in the Northeast, it does not rain in the rest of the country. That's how the monsoon trough works, and that is how it happens. But apart from this, and despite this, now for the past 30 years that we have seen in the monsoon rainfall data, it clearly shows a drying trend. Apart from that, there are a lot of local factors that affect climate in the Northeast, because there are a lot of microclimates that are there. The climate regime, basically, weather regime basically changes very quickly when you travel from the river basin of Brahmaputra, Assam, basically, towards the mountains of hills and mountains of Arunachal, or towards the hills and hills of Meghalaya or Nagaland or Manipur. So because the weather regime changes very quickly, therefore, whatever global climatic factors are relevant, they become even more intense or even more problematic when you go into the districts and the local regions of Northeast, basically.
So bottom line is, from what I'm hearing from Akshit, one is the peculiarity of the monsoon season, which was already peculiar for the Northeast, and it's getting worse and more with climate change, number one. Number two, you're very rich in your local diversity of weather. So now with the changes that are coming at the sub-regional, sub-local level, it is having a greater impact on you. I will add two more factors. One is the fact that you are a Himalayan region, and Himalayas are intrinsically prone to landslides, to cloudbursts, and therefore that makes you also much more prone. And the fourth reason is that you are really an ecosystem-based economy, which means that any weather changes that happen directly impact nature and impact the livelihoods of people. So there are four large reasons why I think the Northeast needs to be understood in terms of its vulnerability as we go forward. Now, Daniel, your question, however important it is impossible for me to answer. I have no idea what the fence will do. I have no idea where it is being built, and I have no idea of its environmental impacts, okay? I think the most important thing that we have to understand as environmentalists is that there is a lot of complexity in the issues, and that we should not get into doing environmentalism where we have answers and comments on things that we don't know. Okay, so that is very, very important. So please don't ask me such questions. I have no clue. Okay. I think you are better to find out what the impact will be locally than somebody like me who has no idea about it. So I think that's also part of our challenge, that we should not start talking about things that we know nothing about. And that's good journalism, it's good activism, and it makes us what we are, good reporters on the events around us, and an ability to tell the story as it is happening. So, Mr. Sangma, last words to you, and then I will give it to Shuparno to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Nitaji. I mean, for me, it's been really such an enriching experience being on this platform. And, I've read so much about you. I've, heard so much about you, and it's such a pleasure to be here, to be finally, not maybe physically, but at least virtually face to face with each other, and to interact more importantly in this matter regarding this subject. And I can assure you, I'm extremely passionate about it. At the risk of being, a lot of people criticizing me, I am an environmentalist first, and I'm a minister second. For me, that is what I am. And I am very happy that I got this opportunity to, interact here, and more importantly, to learn a lot of things. The presentations given by Akshit, by Vantika, really, something, so much of information I've been able to gather from that. And I really, really want to take you up on your thoughts about coming to Shillong. I would love to host you here, and really look forward to seeing you in Shillong, I hope very soon. And please, feel free to reach out to me anytime, Sunitaji, and I will take your number, and I hope you won't mind me if I keep, sometimes.
Not at all. But the main thing, Mr. Sangma, is we will keep following you on your idea of the environment state of
Thank you so much for your support.
And we will keep pushing you, asking you, and keep writing about it. So please go ahead. We're looking forward to seeing that happen.
Much. Yeah, thank you for your support for the idea. It's very, it's still, a very new idea, and I'm so happy that I have your support in this. So look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Shuparno, please.
So basically, just a very big thanks to all of you who joined here today. Let me just add, here that we had a lot of registrations for this event, this first Northeast Narratives that we planned. But we had to unfortunately refuse a few of them because we just wanted to sort of put it across to the media people of Northeast and not to everybody else. But I'm hoping that in the future, we will be able to accommodate other communities as well as we go along and do more of these interactions. And it's been a really enriching experience. Thank you so much. And I hope it's been the same for all of you. And we'll continue to do this with all your support. Thank you and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And we will keep doing